Chapter 1. A Fatal Performance. The grand ballroom of the Chateau Lumière was ablaze with golden candlelight, casting elongated shadows across the polished marble floors. Tonight, the elite of Parisian society had gathered in opulent splendor for a charity gala hosted by the enigmatic Count Lucien d'Arcy. Gowns shimmered, champagne flowed, and laughter rang through the air. But amidst the glittering facade, tension lurked unseen, like a dagger concealed beneath silk. At the heart of the spectacle stood the night's most anticipated attraction, Valerie Sinclair, the celebrated actress known as much for her beauty as for the scandals that clung to her like perfume. Draped in crimson, she commanded the stage with a theatrical monologue, her voice rich with emotion. Yet, as she raised her arms in a dramatic flourish, a gasp rippled through the audience. Her expression faltered. A tremor ran through her fingers. Then, with a sudden violent shudder, she collapsed. Silence, thick and suffocating, engulfed the ballroom. For an eternal moment, no one moved. Then screams shattered the stillness. A doctor rushed forward. The host, Count d'Arcy, strode onto the stage, his face pale beneath his powdered wig. "Mademoiselle Sinclair," he cried. But it was too late. A dagger protruded from her side, a slender, ornate weapon with an intricate, hollow hilt. And from its tip, a single drop of darkened liquid fell onto the stage. Poison. A murder had been committed in the midst of high society, and every guest present was now a suspect. Across the room, an unassuming figure stirred. With an air of quiet detachment, Hercule Poirot set down his champagne flute. His green eyes twinkled with interest as he reached for his pocket watch. "Nu, Dieu," he murmured, "the curtain has barely risen, and already the play has reached its climax." He turned to his companion, the ever-loyal Captain Hastings, who was still frozen in shock. "Come, my dear Hastings," Poirot said, standing. "There is work to be done. And as always, the mind must be sharper than the blade." Chapter 2. The Gathering of Suspects. The air inside the Chateau Lumière had transformed. Moments ago, it had been alive with music, champagne, and whispered gossip. Now, silence gripped the ballroom, broken only by the occasional hushed exclamations of guests still reeling from the murder that had unfolded before their eyes. The scent of expensive perfume mingled with something sharper, something acrid, the unmistakable tang of death. Hercule Poirot moved with precise steps toward the body of Valerie Sinclair, his sharp green eyes scanning the scene before crouching down carefully as though to avoid disturbing the very air around him. Hastings stood nearby, pale and visibly shaken, but accustomed enough to Poirot's work to remain silent. A crowd had begun to form, pressing in like vultures around the carcass. At the center, Count Lucien d'Arcy, the host of the evening, stood with a look of utter horror on his aristocratic face. His powdered wig had slipped slightly, revealing graying hair beneath. The dagger protruding from Valerie's side was an unusual thing. Its hilt was hollow, its blade slender but deadly. The delicate design suggested it was not a weapon of brute force, but of cunning, a tool of an assassin rather than a common killer. Poirot studied it without touching it. "Poison," he murmured, "injected directly from the blade. Clever, no? Hastings swallowed. Poirot, this is shocking. In the middle of a grand performance, in front of everyone. Poirot straightened. Ah, but mon ami, murder is never shocking to those who commit it. To them it is simply the logical conclusion of their desires. The only question is, who desired this result? Before Hastings could respond, the heavy double doors of the ballroom burst open. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a navy blue uniform strode inside, followed by several gendarmes. His thick mustache twitched as he surveyed the scene with an air of practiced authority. Inspector Georges Moreau, Paris Prefecture. The man announced, his voice gruff. His dark eyes landed on Poirot. And you, monsieur, you are the famous Belgian detective, are you not? Poirot bowed slightly. Indeed, Hercule Poirot, at your service. Moreau nodded. Then I shall be grateful for your assistance. But first, we must do as procedure demands. He turned to the assembled guests. No one is to leave this chateau until we have spoken to you all. A murder has been committed, and one of you is responsible. A ripple of uneasy murmurs spread through the crowd. Poirot took this moment to survey the potential suspects. Each person in the room had been a witness, but one among them had been the murderer. The suspects: Count Lucien d'Assy, the aristocratic host of the evening, a man of refined manners and calculated charm. His wealth was inherited, but whispers suggested he had financial troubles beneath his polished exterior. Had Valerie known something about him? 2. Jean-Luc Fournier, a playwright and close acquaintance of Valerie. Rumor had it they had been lovers once, but their affair had ended bitterly. His recent plays had received harsh reviews. Was Valerie somehow involved in his public humiliation? Marguerite Rousseau, renowned opera singer and Valerie's fiercest rival. They had shared a stage many times, but their rivalry extended beyond performances. There had been allegations of stolen roles, sabotage, and even affairs. Paul Girard, Valerie's manager, a shrewd businessman with a sharp tongue. He had built her career, but also controlled it with an iron grip. Had she been planning to break free from his influence? Madame Elodie Beaumont, a wealthy widow known for her patronage of the arts. She had been seen arguing with Valerie earlier that evening, some said over a personal matter rather than a professional one. Armand Leclerc, a stagehand, who had worked behind the scenes, normally invisible in the world of glamour. But was there more to him than met the eye? As Inspector Moreau began questioning the guests, Poirot watched. He was not interested in what they said, but in how they said it. The trembling of hands, the glances exchanged, the slight hesitations. These were the true clues. The interviews begin. The first to be questioned was Jean-Luc Fournier. The playwright, a thin man with dark circles under his eyes, looked genuinely shaken. He twisted his hands as he spoke. I would never have harmed Valerie. Yes, we had quarrels, but that was long ago. She was larger than life, you understand. Always seeking drama, even in real life. Poirot tilted his head. Drama, monsieur. But surely, one does not seek it in one's own murder, no? Fournier shuddered. Of course not. Fournier shuddered. Of course not. I swear to you, I had no reason to kill her. Next was Marguerite Rousseau. The opera singer had an air of cold elegance, her posture rigid. Valerie and I were competitors, she admitted, but we respected each other. Poirot's moustache twitched. And yet, madame, you were seen in a rather heated exchange with Mademoiselle Sinclair earlier this evening. Marguerite hesitated. It was nothing. A disagreement about a role. Nothing worth killing over. Ah, Poirot said softly. That is where you are mistaken, madam. Many murders have been committed for far less. Paul Girard, the manager, scoffed when it was his turn. Valerie was difficult, but she was profitable. Why would I kill my own investment? Poirot studied him carefully. Perhaps because she was no longer an investment, monsieur. Perhaps she had grown inconvenient. Girard's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. As the interviews continued, it became clear that everyone had a reason to resent Valerie Sinclair. Yet resentment alone was not enough. Poirot knew there was a deeper layer beneath the surface, a clue unnoticed as the questioning continued. Poirot's eyes kept returning to one small detail. The dagger. It was a rare kind of weapon, not one that would be found in any ordinary household. It spoke of planning, of careful intent. And then he saw it. A single thread of red fabric caught on the dagger's hilt. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Valerie's gown had been crimson, yes, but this thread, it was different. A slightly darker shade. Poirot straightened, his mind already forming connections. Inspector Moreau, he said suddenly, interrupting the interview. There is something I wish to confirm. If you would permit me a moment alone in the dressing rooms. Moreau frowned. What do you expect to find? Poirot smiled. That, monsieur, is the difference between us. You seek a murder weapon. I seek the mind that wielded it. And with that, Poirot turned and strode out of the ballroom, Hastings hurrying behind him. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. But there was one thing he knew for certain. This was not the first time the killer had used the hollow dagger. Chapter 3. The first false lead inspector. Moreau trailed behind Poirot and Hastings as they strode through the grand hallways of Chateau Lumiere. The corridors, once a picture of refinement, now held an eerie quiet, their gilded mirrors and ornate chandeliers casting long shadows. Poirot, Hastings whispered as they approached the dressing rooms. What do you expect to find, mon ami? Poirot murmured. Murderers are most careless, even when they believe themselves clever. It is a great paradox, you see. Those who seek to control every detail inevitably leave behind the most telling clue. They stopped in front of Valerie Sinclair's dressing room. The heavy door was slightly ajar, revealing a room still brimming with her presence. Exquisite gowns hung neatly, perfume lingered in the air, and an open vanity mirror reflected the remnants of a woman who had, just hours ago, commanded the stage. Poirot entered with delicate precision, his sharp gaze moving over each object with the careful intensity of a man reading an intricate puzzle. He paused at the velvet chairs, where a crimson shawl was draped carelessly. Picking it up, he examined the fibers. Interesting, he murmured. Moreau sighed impatiently. Poirot, we have a room full of suspects. What do you hope to learn from... But patience, mon cher inspecteur. Let us observe, let us think. Poirot turned the shawl over in his hands, then gestured for Hastings to step closer. "My friend, observe carefully. This fabric here." He held out a portion of the shawl. "This weave, this precise shade of crimson. It is slightly different. No?" Hastings squinted. "It looks close enough to the dress Valerie wore." "But not identical," Poirot said. "And what did we find earlier, caught upon the hilt of the dagger?" "A thread of a slightly darker red." Hastings' eyes widened. "Good heavens, Poirot, are you saying the murderer wore something like this?" "Exactement." Poirot folded the shawl. "The true killer may have left behind a thread, not from Valerie's dress, but from their own clothing." Moreau crossed his arms. "A promising lead, perhaps, but we need something more concrete." Poirot smiled. "Ah, but we already have it, mon ami. You simply do not see it yet." A guilty suspect. Too soon, returning to the ballroom, Poirot found the suspects gathered in tense anticipation. Some clutched their champagne glasses tightly, others whispered in corners. But all of them carried the same underlying fear. Before Moreau could proceed with his formal questioning, a gendarme burst into the room, breathless. "Inspector, we have found something of great importance." Moreau's mustache twitched. "Well, speak, man." The officer held up a silk handkerchief, dark red, stained with something that looked suspiciously like perfume. "It was found in the dressing room of Marguerite Rousseau, monsieur." A collective gasp echoed through the room. The opera singer stiffened, her dark eyes flashing with indignation. "What is this nonsense?" she demanded. Poirot remained silent, watching. Moreau stepped forward. "Madame Rousseau, explain yourself. How do you account for this handkerchief being found in your dressing room?" Marguerite lifted her chin. "I do not have to explain anything. A handkerchief is no proof of murder." "But the color, madame," Poirot interjected gently. "It is strikingly similar to the thread we found on the dagger. And the scent, unmistakably like your own perfume." A murmur rippled through the guests. Marguerite's hands clenched into fists. "This is absurd. If I were the murderer, why would I leave something so obvious in my own dressing room?" "A valid point," Poirot conceded, tapping his temple. "And yet, madame, one cannot deny that this piece of evidence is très intéressant." Moreau turned to his men. "Search her belongings. If she has the rest of the gown, we may have found our murderer." Marguerite's face darkened. "This is an outrage." Poirot, however, had turned away, deep in thought. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, "surely this is too obvious. Marguerite is an intelligent woman. If she were the murderer, would she really leave such a clue behind?" "Ah, Hastings," Poirot said softly, "you begin to understand. It is a false lead. Someone is trying to frame Mademoiselle Rousseau." The true purpose of the false clue Marguerite was escorted away, her protests growing louder. The crowd whispered, some convinced of her guilt, others uncertain. Poirot, meanwhile, remained utterly calm. He approached Jean-Luc Fournier, the playwright, who had been watching the scene with sharp eyes. "Monsieur Fournier," Poirot said casually, "you seemed particularly interested in that handkerchief." Fournier hesitated. It is a dramatic twist. No." He attempted a weak chuckle. "Something right out of one of my plays." Yes, indeed, Poirot mused, and yet I find it too neat, too convenient. Tell me, monsieur, where were you when the murder occurred? I was watching from the side, near the second floor balcony, Fournier said quickly. Poirot nodded. And did you see anything unusual? Fournier shifted uncomfortably. Well, I saw a figure moving toward the stage entrance, but it was dark. I cannot say who it was. Aha, Poirot murmured. And yet, monsieur, if you were near the balcony, you would have had a very clear view of the dressing rooms. Curious that you did not mention this before, no? Fournier swallowed hard. I did not think it relevant. Poirot stepped closer. Or perhaps, monsieur, you did not wish to draw attention to yourself. The playwright flinched, but before he could reply, another commotion erupted. A maid rushed into the room, face pale. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector. Another discovery. She held out something small, a thin vial, hidden in the lining of an evening coat belonging to Paul Girard. Moreau snatched it from her, opened it, and sniffed. Poison, he declared. Gasps filled the room once more. Girard, the manager, bolted upright. This is preposterous. I do not know how that got there. Poirot observed him carefully. 2 false leads now. First Marguerite, now Girard. Someone was being very, very clever. Poirot's silent deduction. As the accusations flew, Poirot let his little gray cells work in silence. Someone had planted the handkerchief. Someone had planted the poison vial. Who stood to gain from these false leads? Poirot considered Marguerite's rivalry with Valerie made her an easy scapegoat. Girard's controlling nature made him a natural suspect. Fournier had witnessed something and was hiding it. Lucien d'Arcy, the host, remained unusually quiet. A pattern was forming. The killer was methodical, precise. They had planned for layers of deception, planting evidence to mislead, but Poirot saw through it. He turned, a small smile on his lips. The true path was becoming clear. Chapter 4. The Psychological Game. A storm rumbled beyond the great windows of Chateau Lumière, distant thunder rolling over the French countryside. The elegant ballroom, now transformed into an interrogation hall, had lost its warmth. Shadows stretched across the polished floors, and the air was thick with tension. Hercule Poirot, ever composed, surveyed the faces of the suspects, his keen eyes absorbing every flicker of emotion, every nervous tick. Someone in this room was a murderer, and they had begun playing a very dangerous game. A strategy of subtlety. Poirot, standing at the center of the room, smoothed his lapel and turned to Inspector Moreau. Let us proceed delicately, mon ami. We are not brutes. A murderer is most dangerous when cornered, but even the cleverest of killers cannot resist the weight of their own guilt. Moreau scoffed. I prefer direct methods, Poirot. Ah, but directness leads to resistance. We shall employ a psychological approach. I will not accuse, I will simply observe. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back and watched them undo themselves. Moreau sighed. Fine, but be quick about it. Poirot's mustache twitched in amusement. Ah, mon cher, patience is a virtue, the good first test. The handwriting Poirot arranged for a small writing desk to be brought into the ballroom. Upon it sat a single blank sheet of paper and a gold-tipped fountain pen. The suspects exchanged confused glances. "My friends," Poirot announced, "before we begin, a simple request. Would each of you be so kind as to write a brief note? Nothing elaborate, simply a line stating your whereabouts at the time of Mademoiselle Sinclair's murder." Marguerite, Rousseau still seething from her earlier accusations, crossed her arms. "Why? What does our handwriting prove?" Poirot spread his hands. "Madame, it proves nothing, unless, of course, one has something to hide." A flicker of doubt passed through Marguerite's features before she approached the desk, snatched the Bayeux pen, and scribbled quickly. One by one, the suspects followed, each leaving behind a small piece of themselves. Poirot collected the papers and studied them, but it was not the handwriting he examined. It was their behavior. Marguerite Rousseau wrote furiously, her pen strokes erratic, her frustration evident. Jean-Luc Fournier, the playwright, hesitated slightly before writing, perhaps considering what to say. Paul Girard, the opera manager, pressed too hard, his letters deeply etched into the paper. A sign of nervousness? Lucien Darcy, the host, took his time, his letters elegant, methodical, controlled, perhaps too much so. Poirot tapped a finger against his lips. "Curious, very curious." Moreau leaned in. "What have you found?" Poirot shook his head. "Not what is written, my friend, but what was felt while writing. Fear, irritation, control. We begin to see the inner landscape of our suspects, and among them, one stood out. A subtle trap for Fournier." Poirot turned to Jean-Luc Fournier. "Monsieur, you are a playwright, are you not?" Fournier frowned. "Of course, Poirot. What of it?" "A master of words, of constructing narratives. And yet, when asked to write a simple statement, you hesitated. Why? Slip? Girard's fear." Before Poirot could press further, a glass shattered. All eyes turned to Paul Girard, who had knocked over a champagne flute. His hands trembled slightly as he reached to clean the mess. Poirot watched him carefully. "Monsieur, Girard, your nerves betray you." Girard forced a chuckle. "I am simply under stress like everyone else here." "But you were not under such stress before," Poirot noted. "When Marguerite was accused, you were composed. When we found the poison vial in your coat, you were indignant, but not afraid. And yet now, after a simple writing exercise, you tremble." Girard swallowed. I have nothing to hide." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet, you react as though you do. Intriguing, no?" Moreau crossed his arms. "Do you suspect Girard, Poirot?" Poirot glanced at Girard, who looked ready to bolt. Then he shook his head. "No. He is hiding something, yes, but not murder. No, my friend, Monsieur Girard is hiding fear." Moreau frowned. "Fear of what?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That is what we must uncover." A game of reflection. Poirot turned to the grand mirror lining the ballroom wall. "Mes amis," he said, "look upon yourselves. You see the reflections of innocent people, do you not? And yet, within this very room, a murderer stands among you." A collective shiver passed through the group. "Every man and woman here wears a mask," Poirot continued. "Some wear masks of grief, others of anger. Some wear masks to hide their guilt, and some to conceal their terror." His eyes locked onto Lucien Darcy. Lucien, who had been so quiet, so composed. Lucien, whose hands remained in his pockets as though hiding something. Lucien, who had said almost nothing during the entire investigation. Poirot turned away, as if dismissing him, but he had already planted the seed. The psychological shift. Poirot's strategy was simple. Raise suspicion on Fournier to watch his reaction. 2. Unsettle Girard to reveal his deeper fear. 3. Subtly challenge Lucien, the quietest of them all, and, now, the murderer, whoever they were, would begin to panic, because for the first time they knew that Poirot was watching them. Chapter 5. The Second Crime. A hush fell over Chateau Lumière as the storm outside gained strength, casting eerie flickers of light through the stained glass windows. It was a night filled with unease, the weight of Poirot's psychological game pressing down on the suspects. And then, just as Poirot had anticipated, the murderer struck again. A midnight disturbance. It was shortly after midnight when a blood-curdling scream shattered the uneasy silence. Poirot, sitting in his guest chamber, immediately rose. His keen mind had expected a reaction from the murderer, but he had not anticipated it to be quite so soon. "Hastings," he called, already slipping on his dressing gown. Hastings, flustered and still half asleep, stumbled into the hallway. "What the devil was that?" "A second crime, mon ami," Poirot murmured. "Come, we must move quickly." Rushing down the dimly lit corridors, they followed the source of the scream. Moreau, already awake, stormed ahead of them, his revolver drawn. They arrived at the Grand Library, where the door stood ajar. The flickering light of a single lamp cast long shadows across the bookshelves. And there, sprawled across the Persian rug, was Jean-Luc Fournier. Dead, the scene of the crime. Fournier lay on his back, eyes wide open, frozen in shock. A silver letter opener was buried in his chest. A small pool of blood seeping into the fabric of his dressing gown. Marguerite Rousseau, the one who had screamed, stood trembling near the doorway, her face pale. I came down for a book," she stammered. "I found him like this." Poirot studied the scene, stepping delicately over the rug. "Fascinating," he murmured. Moreau knelt beside the body, touching Fournier's wrist. "No pulse. He's been dead for at least a few minutes. The murderer must have just fled." "Oui," Poirot agreed. "But what interests me most is not the weapon, nor even the timing, but rather the message." Hastings frowned. "Message." Poirot pointed. Near Fournier's hand, written in his own blood, was a single word. Dagger. A silence fell upon the dear room. "Mon Dieu," Moreau muttered. "Was he trying to tell us something before he died?" Poirot folded his arms. "Ah, but look at his fingers. There is no smearing, no sign that he was truly writing this word." Marguerite gasped. "You mean someone else wrote it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Exactement. The murderer wished us to believe that Fournier was leaving us a clue. But, mes amis, this is what we call a contrived deception." Hastings exhaled. "So, it's a false clue?" Poirot nodded. "Planted to lead us astray. Who gains from Fournier's death?" Moreau rubbed his temples. "First Mademoiselle Sinclair, now Fournier. Are we dealing with one murderer, Poirot, or two?" "One," Poirot said confidently. "And this second crime tells me that the murderer has begun to feel trapped." Marguerite whispered. "But why kill Fournier?" Poirot turned to the assembled suspects. Lucien Darcy, the reserved host, watched with unreadable eyes. Paul Girard, the opera manager, clutched his arms as if trying to warm himself. Marguerite Rousseau, still trembling, kept glancing at the bloody message. Poirot's voice softened. "Mademoiselle Rousseau, you were the first to find the body. Did you hear any movement?" She shook her head. "No, only silence before I entered." Poirot tilted his head. "Interesting." Moreau frowned. "Are you suggesting she did it?" Poirot chuckled. "No, no. But I suspect she was meant to find the body." A staged scene. Poirot gestured to the letter opener buried in Fournier's chest. "This weapon, how convenient that it is from the very desk Fournier used earlier in the evening." Hastings scratched his head. "You think the killer wanted us to link this crime to Fournier's earlier actions?" Poirot smiled. "Precisely, mon ami. The murderer is trying to shape our thoughts, to guide our suspicions. That is what makes this crime particularly dangerous." Moreau stood. "Then who had the most reason to silence Fournier?" Poirot tapped his temple. "Let us consider that, my friends. Fournier was a playwright, a man who constructed narratives. And yet, when we last saw him, he had grown afraid." Hastings' eyes widened. "You think he figured something out?" Poirot nodded. "And the murderer knew it. That is why he was killed tonight." The missing item. Poirot paced the room. "That is something absent here. Something that should be present, but is not." The suspects exchanged glances. Hastings sighed. "Poirot, must you be so cryptic?" Poirot stopped abruptly. "Tell me, where is Fournier's notebook?" A ripple of unease spread through the group. "He always had it with him," Marguerite whispered. "He wrote everything down." "And yet," Poirot said, spreading his hands, "it is gone." Hastings whistled. "Then the murderer took it." Poirot beamed. "Très bien, Hastings. Now, we ask ourselves, why?" Moreau sighed. "Because it contained something damning." "Exactement." Poirot turned to Lucien Darcy. "Monsieur Darcy, you were last seen speaking with Fournier before dinner. Did he mention anything peculiar?" Lucien's expression did not change. "No, he was his usual dramatic self." Poirot gave a slight nod. "Curious, very curious." The murderer's growing desperation. Poirot turned back to Moreau. "My friend, you recall that earlier we discussed psychological pressure?" Moreau grunted. "Yes, and?" Poirot's expression darkened. "The murderer has reached a breaking point. The second crime proves that." He turned to the assembled suspects, his voice low and deliberate. "Tonight, someone among you felt so threatened, so exposed, that they were willing to kill again. But in doing so, they have made a grave mistake, for they have given me the final piece of the puzzle." The room was silent. Poirot turned towards the grand mirror once more, where their reflections stood like spectral witnesses. "Mes amis, the game is almost over. And the murderer, they know it too." Chapter 6. Poirot's Hidden Clue. The library had been sealed, Fournier's body removed, and yet an air of unease still hung over Chateau Lumière. The second murder had shaken everyone, deepening the mystery and heightening tensions among the remaining suspects. Moreau had doubled the security, stationing officers throughout the estate. Yet Poirot knew that no locked door or patrolling constable could stop what was coming next. The murderer was desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. A morning of restless minds. The following morning the household gathered for a strained breakfast. It was a quiet affair, with only the clinking of silverware breaking the tension. Poirot, ever composed, observed the suspects from his seat at the head of the table. Lucien Darcy sipped his coffee, his fingers tapping absently against the table. Paul Girard barely touched his plate, glancing at the door as if expecting someone to enter. Marguerite Rousseau, pale and visibly shaken, stirred her tea but did not drink it. Poirot cleared his throat. A tragic night indeed, mes amis. And yet, we must not let fear cloud our minds. Murderers thrive in chaos, no. Marguerite shuddered. I hardly slept. The idea that the killer is still among us. Moreau, sitting at the far end, nodded grimly. I've stationed guards throughout the property. No one is leaving without my say-so. Ah, but mon ami, you must also be careful. Poirot set down his napkin. A murderer does not always need to flee. Sometimes they hide in plain sight. Lucien leaned forward. Poirot, you said something last night about a mistake the killer made. What did you mean? Poirot smiled. All in due time, monsieur. I merely say this. One detail in Fournier's death was too convenient. Paul Girard swallowed. You mean the bloody message? Poirot inclined his head. Indeed, a deception designed to lead us away from the truth. But if one removes what is false, what remains? Moreau frowned. The truth. Exactement. Poirot took a small bite of his toast, and I intend to uncover it. Examining Fournier's room. After breakfast, Poirot led Moreau and Hastings to Jean-Luc Fournier's quarters. The room was modestly furnished, with a desk, a bookshelf filled with classic literature, and a fireplace where the embers had long since died out. The bed was neatly made, suggesting Fournier had not expected to sleep before his death. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the room. We are looking for something missing, mes amis. Something that should be here, but is not. Hastings folded his arms. Well, we already know his notebook is missing. But what else? Poirot tapped his fingers against the desk. A man like Fournier, so meticulous, so detail-oriented, would not keep his thoughts confined to a single notebook. Moreau sighed. Poirot, we've been over this room. There's nothing out of place. Poirot ignored him, stepping toward the fireplace. He crouched, inspecting the ashes with interest. Curious, he murmured. Hastings blinked. What is? Poirot pointed. Do you see, Hastings? These ashes, they are not entirely from burnt wood. Moreau stepped closer. You think something was burned here? Poirot nodded. And look. He carefully sifted through the air remnants, retrieving a half-burned scrap of paper. The edges were charred, the writing barely legible. But as Poirot smoothed it out, 2 words could still be read. Hollow dagger. Moreau let out a low whistle. Mon Dieu. Hastings leaned in. That's the name of the stolen artifact. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Exactement, mon ami. Fournier was trying to tell us something before he died, and the murderer, realizing this, attempted to erase that knowledge. Moreau exhaled. But why would Fournier write about the hollow dagger? He wasn't a collector, nor did he seem interested in the artifact. Poirot tapped his chin. Unless he discovered something that connected it to the murders. Hastings frowned. But the dagger hasn't been seen since its theft. Could it still be hidden in the chateau? Poirot smiled. Ah, now you are thinking, mon cher Hastings. A hidden chamber. Poirot turned to Moreau. My friend, I require your assistance. We must search the chateau for secret compartments or hidden spaces. Moreau sighed. You think there's a hidden chamber? Poirot's mustache twitched. In a house of such history, it would be more surprising if there were not. They began their search, moving through the hallways, the study, and the library. Poirot knocked lightly against walls, listening for hollow spaces. Then, in the grand salon, he paused. His fingers traced along the ornate wood paneling near the fireplace. Aha, he whispered. Moreau and Hastings hurried over. What is it? Poirot pressed against the corner panel, and with a soft click, a section of the wall shifted inward. A hidden compartment. Inside, resting beneath a velvet cloth, was an empty display case. Hastings gasped. Good heavens, was this where the hollow dagger was kept? Moreau nodded grimly. Oui, but it is empty. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Not empty, mon ami. Look closer. At the very bottom of the case was a single strand of dark fabric, almost imperceptible, against the wood. Poirot carefully lifted it with his gloved fingers. Fascinating, he murmured. Hastings squinted. What does it mean? Poirot studied the fabric before slipping it into his pocket. It means, Hastings, that we are closer than ever to revealing our murderer. The murderous trap. They left the salon. Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. The murderer knows I am closing in, he said softly, and that means they will attempt to eliminate me next. Moreau stiffened. What? Poirot, you must leave at once. Poirot chuckled. Ah, but mon ami, I do not intend to flee. No, I shall invite the murderer to make their move. Hastings paled. You're using yourself as bait. Poirot gave a small bow. Indeed, mon cher Hastings, the game is nearly at its end, and tonight I shall give the murderer one final chance to reveal themselves. Moreau frowned. And, if they take the bait, Poirot's eyes glittered, then mon ami, I shall be ready. Chapter 7. The Final Gathering. The grand drawing room of Chateau Lumière was heavy with tension. Candles flickered in their sconces, casting long shadows along the paneled walls. The suspects sat in a semicircle, their faces drawn with fatigue and suspicion. At the center of it all, standing with impeccable composure, was Hercule Poirot. On his right, Inspector Moreau crossed his arms, his face unreadable. On his left, Captain Hastings sat rigidly, his gaze darting between the assembled guests. It was the moment Poirot had been waiting for, the culmination of his psychological chess game with the murderer. Tonight, the killer would reveal themselves. A house of secret. Poirot cleared his throat. Mes amis, you have all been kind enough to humor me these past few days. You have endured my questions, my observations, and my little gray cells. But now, the time has come for clarity. It is time to uncover the truth. Paul Girard let out a bitter laugh. Truth All we know is that 2 men are dead, and the murderer remains among us." Lucien Darcy exhaled sharply. "And you claim to have solved it, Poirot?" The detective raised an eyebrow. "Ah, but of course, the answer was before us all along, mes amis. A series of clever deceptions, a few small mistakes, and one fatal miscalculation." Marguerite Rousseau clutched her hands together. "You mean you know who killed Monsieur Fournier?" "Indeed," Poirot said smoothly. "Not only that, I know who killed Etienne Rousseau. I know why the hollow dagger was stolen, and I know what has been hidden beneath the surface of this tragic affair." Silence fell over the room. The air was electric with suspense. Poirot smiled. "But before I reveal the culprit, let us consider the events once more, this time without deception. The first crime, the death of Etienne Rousseau. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes tapping against the hardwood floor. Etienne Rousseau, a wealthy collector and host of this fine gathering, was found dead in his study. The cause? A fatal stab wound to the chest. The weapon? Ah, but here is where things become intriguing. His gaze swept over them. At first, it was believed that he was killed with a dagger from his own collection. However, the infamous hollow dagger had been stolen just hours before his death. The assumption, of course, was that the 2 events were connected. Lucien frowned. "And weren't they?" Poirot steepled his fingers. "Yes, but not in the way we were led to believe." Hastings leaned forward. "What do you mean, Poirot?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Consider, mon cher Hastings. The hollow dagger is hollow. A decorative piece with no real blade." Paul Girard exhaled sharply. "So you're saying it couldn't have been used as the murder weapon?" "Precisely," Poirot said triumphantly. "The murderer used a different weapon entirely, a normal dagger, but arranged the scene to make it appear as though the hollow dagger was involved." Marguerite gasped. "To mislead us." Poirot nodded. "Oui, it was a trick, mes amis, a clever misdirection. The murderer hoped that by creating confusion around the dagger's theft, we would chase shadows rather than truth. The second crime, the death of Jean-Luc Fournier." Poirot's expression darkened. Then, just when we began to untangle the deception, a second murder occurred. Jean-Luc Fournier, the astute journalist, was silenced before he could reveal what he had discovered. Moreau spoke grimly. "Fournier was found in the library. His throat had been cut." "Oui," Poirot agreed. "And yet, the manner of his death was not hurried. It was deliberate. The killer wanted to ensure he never spoke again." Paul's hands clenched. "And the bloody message. Ha ha!" Poirot's eyes gleamed. A final piece of misdirection. Fournier was dying, weak and fading. And yet, in his last moments, he managed to scroll the words "hollow dagger" in his own blood. Lucien exhaled. "So, he was trying to tell us the hollow dagger was the key to everything." "Or," Poirot countered, "was he trying to tell us something else entirely?" The room fell silent. Poirot's voice softened. What if he did not mean to write hollow dagger at all? What if he meant something different, but death claimed him before he could finish? Marguerite clutched her throat. Then, what was he trying to say? Poirot stepped forward, his eyes piercing. He was trying to write a name. A sharp intake of breath. Moreau's voice was low. "Whose name, Poirot?" Poirot turned slowly, his gaze locking onto one person in the room, the murderer, the killer. Unmasked, a single second stretched into eternity. Then Poirot spoke. "The murderer is you, Paul Girard." Gasps erupted around the room. Girard froze, his face turning pale. What? Poirot raised a finger. "Do not play innocent, Monsieur Girard. I have known the truth for some time now." Hastings shot up. "Good Lord, Poirot, are you certain?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Ah, mon ami, I am always certain." Girard's hands curled into fists. "This is absurd. I had no reason to kill Rousseau, no reason to kill Fournier." "Ah, but that is where you are mistaken," Poirot said coolly. "You had two very compelling reasons." Girard's jaw tightened. "Go on then. Let's hear your theory." Poirot tilted his head. "Very well." He began to reconstruct the crime, piece by piece. Paul Girard, a well-known art dealer, had secretly forged multiple priceless artifacts. One of them, the very hollow dagger Rousseau believed to be genuine. Lucien gasped. "You mean the dagger is a fake?" Poirot nodded. The true hollow dagger was never stolen. Rousseau was duped into buying a forgery. But when he discovered the deception, he confronted the one man who had sold it to him. Marguerite whispered, "Ah, Paul." Poirot's voice sharpened. "You knew Rousseau would ruin you, so you killed him before he could expose your fraud." Girard staggered back, his faucet face ashen. Poirot continued relentless. "And when Jean-Luc Fournier, ever the brilliant journalist, began piecing the truth together, you eliminated him as well." The room was silent. Poirot sighed. "Your greatest mistake, Monsieur Girard, was assuming I would believe your lies." Girard's hands trembled. "This is madness." Poirot smiled. "Then tell me, mon ami, why did we find a scrap of your coat in the hidden compartment?" Girard stilled. Moreau's eyes narrowed. "So that's why you were so eager to pin the blame elsewhere." Girard's lips parted. Then he bolted. "Stop him!" Moreau shouted. But Poirot was already prepared. As Girard lunged for the door, Moreau tackled him to the ground. The struggle lasted mere seconds. With a sharp twist of the arm, the inspector snapped handcuffs around Girard's wrists. It was over. Justice is served. Girard sat slumped, his breath ragged. Poirot smoothed his cuffs. "I warned you, monsieur. The truth, it always comes out." Moreau exhaled. "You did it, Poirot." Marguerite wiped her eyes. "It's over." Poirot smiled gently. "Oui, mademoiselle. Justice has been served." As Girard was led away, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Well, mon ami, another case solved. Perhaps now we may finally enjoy a peaceful evening." Hastings chuckled. "Not likely, Poirot." Poirot sighed dramatically. "Ah, the curse of genius." And, eke with that, Hercule Poirot's work was done. Chapter 8. Outcome and Justice. As the heavy wooden doors of Chateau Lumière swung shut behind Paul Girard, the oppressive tension that had gripped the manor for days finally began to ease. A long sigh of relief rippled through the remaining guests. Poirot, ever meticulous, adjusted his cuff. He had done what he set out to do: expose the truth, unravel the deception, and bring justice to those who had been wronged. But even as the storm of events began to settle, there were still loose ends to tie up. The weight of truth. Marguerite Rousseau had sunk into an armchair, her face pale with exhaustion. Her delicate hands trembled as she wiped away stray tears. "I cannot believe it," she murmured. "Paul, all this time, he was the one who killed my father." Poirot nodded gently. "It is difficult to accept, mademoiselle, but the facts do not lie." Lucien Darcy, still stunned, ran a hand through his thick dark hair. "And all for what? To cover up a forgery?" Poirot sighed. But human nature, mon cher. Creed, fear, self-preservation. They drive people to unspeakable acts. Monsieur Girard was a man who had built his reputation on deception. When Etienne Rousseau uncovered the fraud, Girard saw only one way out. Hastings crossed his arms. So he killed Rousseau and framed the crime around the hollow dagger, hoping we'd follow the wrong trail. Poirot smiled approvingly. "Très bien, Hastings. That is precisely what he did." "But why kill Jean-Luc Fournier?" Marguerite asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Poirot's expression darkened. "Because Monsieur Fournier was a journalist who had already uncovered the truth. Had he lived but a few more hours, he would have exposed everything." Inspector Moreau, standing near the fireplace, nodded. "A desperate act by a desperate man, and yet he almost got away with it." Poirot chuckled lightly. But almost is not good enough when Hercule Poirot is on the case." A justice served in full. There was a quiet knock at the door, and a uniformed officer stepped in. He saluted Inspector Moreau. "Girard has been secured, sir. He has confessed to everything." Murmurs spread through the room. Marguerite covered her mouth with her hands. "He confessed." The officer nodded. "Once he realized there was no escape, he admitted to both murders." Lucien exhaled sharply. "Mon Dieu!" Moreau turned to Poirot. "A clean confession. It saves us the trouble of a lengthy investigation." Poirot dipped his head. Confession or not, the truth was already clear. It was only a matter of time before he admitted it. A silence settled over the group, the weight of the past few days pressing down on them. At last, Marguerite spoke. "And now, what happens to Paul?" Moreau's face was grim. "He will stand trial. Given the nature of his crimes, it is unlikely he will ever walk free again." Poirot nodded solemnly. "Justice, mademoiselle. It is the only path left." A final reflection. The night deepened. The guests slowly began to retire to their rooms, eager to leave the horrors of the past behind them. Only Poirot, Hastings, and Moreau remained in the dimly lit drawing room. Hastings let out a long breath. "Well, Poirot, another case solved, and a rather brilliant one, if I may say so." Poirot gave a modest shrug. "Ah, mon ami, one does one's best." Moreau chuckled. "You are far too humble, Poirot. This case would have been impossible to solve without you." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Inspector. But I must say, this case was particularly intriguing. A mystery wrapped in deception, psychological games, and a killer who thought himself most clever." Hastings smirked. "But, as always, not clever enough for you." Poirot lifted a finger. "Exactly, mon cher Hastings. A murderer always makes a mistake. It is my duty to find it. Hastings leaned back, stretching. I suppose this means we can finally leave this place. The moment the trains start running again, I plan on returning to London. Poirot nodded, but his eyes twinkled. Ah, Hastings, I fear you may have grown accustomed to peace too soon. Hastings frowned. What do you mean? Poirot smiled knowingly. The world is full of crime, mon ami, and wherever there is crime, there will always be Poirot. Epilogue, a new beginning. The following morning, as Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave the chateau, Marguerite found them near the grand staircase. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I wanted to thank you." Poirot turned, his expression gentle. "Ah, mademoiselle, there is no need." She shook her head. "But there is. You did not just solve my father's murder, you gave me closure. I do not know how I will move forward yet, but at least now I have the truth." Poirot nodded. "The truth, mademoiselle, is always the first step toward healing." She hesitated, then asked, "And what about the hollow dagger? What will become of it?" Poirot chuckled. "Ah, a fascinating artifact, no. And yet, an object that has caused so much suffering. Perhaps it is best if it disappears from history altogether." Marguerite smiled faintly. "Perhaps," with a final nod. Poirot and Hastings made their way to the awaiting carriage. As they stepped inside, Hastings leaned forward. "You know, Poirot," he mused, "every time I think we've encountered the strangest case yet, something even more unusual comes along." Poirot laughed. "Ah, mon ami, that is the beauty of the world. There is always another mystery waiting." The carriage pulled away, the grand estate of Chateau Lumière fading into the distance. A new case awaited Poirot on the horizon. But for now, he had solved the mystery of the hollow dagger, and justice had been served. Chapter 9. The Shadow of the Hollow Dagger. The train rattled gently as it sped through the rolling countryside, carrying Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings away from Chateau Lumière. The mist-laden hills slowly gave way to open fields, the sky now touched with the first hues of dawn. Hastings let out a deep sigh, stretching his legs in their comfortable first-class compartment. "Well, Poirot, I must say, I won't miss that place. Too much murder for my taste." Poirot, seated opposite him, was immaculately dressed as always, his mustache perfectly groomed. He tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the small wooden table between them. "Ah, Hastings, but it was a case of the most intriguing nature, was it not?" Hastings nodded. "Yes, but I still don't understand something." He leaned forward. "Paul Girard confessed, no doubt about that, but there's something, I don't know, something unsettling about the way it all ended." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Ah, and what troubles you, mon ami?" Hastings shifted in his seat. "The hollow dagger. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it feels as though we haven't seen the last of it." Poirot steepled his fingers. "A most interesting observation, Hastings. You have the instincts, if not always the method, of a detective." Hastings chuckled. "You flatter me." Poirot smiled. "Not at all. There is indeed something about the hollow dagger that does not sit well with me. Did you notice, Hastings, how eager the authorities were to lock Paul Girard away? Hastings frowned. Well, he did commit 2 murders. Oui, bien sûr. And yet, something remains unresolved. Poirot leaned back against his seat. It is a curious thing. A dagger of legend, said to be cursed, used in a crime, and, now, with Gerard behind bars, one would expect the matter to be laid to rest. And yet, it does not feel so, does it? Hastings gave a reluctant nod. You're right, it doesn't. Poirot's eyes glinted. Which means, mon ami, that our work may not be quite finished. An unexpected visitor. The train continued its journey, winding through hills and valleys. Poirot remained deep in thought, his fingers idly tracing the edges of his pocket watch. Then, just as the station whistle echoed through the compartment, the door to their carriage slid open. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. His eyes, dark and piercing, carried an air of urgency. He held his hat in his hands, twisting it slightly, a nervous habit Poirot noted. "Monsieur," he said in a heavy French accent, "forgive the intrusion." Poirot gestured toward the empty seat beside Hastings. "You are most welcome, monsieur. How may we be of service?" The man hesitated, then stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He lowered his voice. "My name is Alain Marchand. I am an investigator with the French Sûreté. I have been following your work at Chateau Lumière." Hastings blinked. "The Sûreté? Then you must be with Inspector Moreau's department." Marchand nodded. "Indeed. Moreau is an excellent officer, but I fear he has made a grave error." Poirot leaned forward, intrigued. "Ah, and what error is this?" Marchand hesitated. "It concerns Paul Girard, his confession." A flicker of interest sparked in Poirot's gaze. "Go on." Marchand exhaled. "He confessed too quickly." Hastings frowned. "Too quickly? But isn't that a good thing?" Marchand shook his head. "Not when a man who has spent his life weaving deception suddenly tells the whole truth without resistance." Poirot's fingers drummed lightly against the table. "A most curious observation." Marchand continued. "And then there is the matter of the hollow dagger itself. It is missing." Hastings nearly jumped out of his seat. "Missing?" Marchand nodded grimly. "It was last seen in Moreau's custody at the chateau, but when the evidence was being transported this morning, the dagger was gone." Poirot's expression darkened. "Ah, as I suspected." Marchand glanced at Poirot sharply. "You suspected this?" Poirot sighed. "Mon cher Marchand, the dagger was never meant to be in the hands of the police. Its mystery is too great, its legend too powerful. There are forces at play here beyond mere crime." Marchand exhaled sharply. "That is precisely why I came, to find you, Monsieur Poirot. I believe that someone else wanted that dagger, someone with a greater plan." Hastings' face turned pale. "You mean Girard was just a pawn?" Marchand nodded. "It is possible, and if that is the case, then the true mastermind behind this mystery is still at large." Poirot closed his eyes for a moment, deep in thought. When he opened them again, his gaze was sharp. "Tell me, Marchand," he said softly, "who else had access to the evidence?" Marchand hesitated. "The officers who transported it, Moreau himself, and one other person." "Who?" Marchand's voice was barely above a whisper. Marguerite Rousseau. The hidden truth, Hastings gasped. Marguerite, but why would she take the dagger? Marchand's expression was grim. That, Captain Hastings, is what we must discover. If Marguerite removed the dagger before it reached the police, she must have had a reason. Poirot leaned back, his fingers pressed together. Tell me, Marchand, where is Mademoiselle Rousseau now? Marchand hesitated. She was last seen boarding a train. Poirot's lips curved into a knowing smile. Then, mon ami, we must assume she is not far. Hastings sat up. You mean, she's on this train? Marchand gave a slow nod. Yes. Poirot stood. Then we must find her before it is too late. The chase begins. The three men moved swiftly through the narrow corridors of the train, their eyes scanning the passing compartments. Poirot led the way, his mind working rapidly. What did Marguerite want with the dagger? Was she protecting it? Or did she know more than she had let on? At last, they reached the rear carriage. Poirot motioned for silence. Carefully, he pushed open the door. Marguerite sat near the window, the dim light casting shadows across her delicate face. In her hands, wrapped in a silk cloth, was the hollow dagger. She did not flinch as they entered. I knew you would come, she said softly. Poirot approached her slowly. Mademoiselle, you have taken great risk. Tell me, why? Marguerite's fingers tightened around the cloth. Because, she whispered, this dagger was never meant to be in anyone's hands. It carries a curse, and if it falls into the wrong ones, it will claim more lives. Marchand stiffened. A curse? Marguerite met his gaze. Do you believe in such things, Inspector? Marchand hesitated. I believe in power, and I believe that certain artifacts can become dangerous if people believe in them too strongly. Poirot's voice was gentle. And yet, mademoiselle, you took the dagger. Marguerite closed her eyes. To protect it, to ensure no one else would die for it. Poirot studied her carefully. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Mademoiselle, the burden is not yours to bear alone. Marguerite looked at him for a long moment. Then, with a deep sigh, she handed him the dagger. Poirot wrapped it carefully in its silk covering. Merci. Hastings let out a breath of relief. So, what now, Poirot? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Now, mon ami, we must ensure that this dagger disappears. Forever. As the train rumbled on, the mystery of the hollow dagger lingered still, a puzzle with no simple solution. But one thing was certain, this was not the end. Chapter 10. The Vanishing Truth. The train continued its rhythmic journey through the French countryside, the dawn light casting long golden streaks across the fields. Inside the rear carriage, a tense silence filled the air as Poirot carefully wrapped the hollow dagger in its silk covering, his expression unreadable. Marguerite Rousseau, seated by the window, watched him with wary eyes. Opposite her, Alain, Marchand of the Sûreté, sat stiffly, his jaw clenched. Hastings, ever the soldier, remained at Poirot's side, his hand hovering near his pocket, half expecting danger. Marguerite broke the silence first. Monsieur Poirot, what do you intend to do with the dagger? Poirot glanced up, his sharp eyes twinkling. Ah, mademoiselle, that is the question, is it not? He placed the silk-wrapped dagger inside his leather travel bag and snapped it shut. But before we decide its fate, We must first answer a far greater mystery. Marchand frowned. Greater than the dagger itself. Poirot nodded. We must determine why Paul Girard confessed. Hastings blinked. But we know why. He killed Dupont and the Baroness. He had the motive, the opportunity, and he even admitted it himself. Poirot sighed. Ah, Hastings, always so quick to accept what is presented before you. He steepled his fingers. Tell me, my friends, what if Paul Girard was not the true killer? Marchand straightened. You suspect he was covering for someone? Poirot's voice was firm. I suspect he was forced to confess. A stunned silence followed. Hastings shook his head. But that makes no sense. Why would he confess to crimes he didn't commit? Poirot tapped his temple. Ah, mon ami, but that is precisely what we must uncover. Let us examine the facts as they stand. He lifted a finger. 1. The Baroness was murdered in a ritualistic manner, the hollow dagger placed deliberately in her hands. A second finger. 2. Paul Girard was arrested, and within 1 hour, he confessed to both murders. A third finger. 3. Before the evidence could be properly secured, the hollow dagger disappeared. His fourth and final finger. And now we find the dagger in the hands of Mademoiselle Rousseau, who claims she took it to prevent further deaths. Marguerite swallowed hard, but did not speak. Poirot leaned forward. Do you not see? This is not the work of one mind, but of several. There is another player in this game, one who has remained in the shadows. Marchand exhaled. You believe there is a mastermind? Poirot nodded. Oui, mon cher. And if we do not uncover them soon, I fear this will not be the last murder. A mysterious message. Just as Poirot finished speaking, the train gave a sudden jolt. Marguerite gasped, gripping the edge of her seat. What was that? Marchand frowned. We're slowing down. Hastings turned to the window. There's no station here, just open fields. Poirot's expression darkened, which means that someone has stopped the train on purpose. At that moment, there was a sharp knock on the carriage door. Marchand moved instinctively, his hand reaching for his revolver, but Poirot lifted a hand. Let us not be hasty. He stepped forward and unlatched the door. A young railway officer stood outside, panting slightly. His uniform was slightly disheveled and his cap was askew. Monsieur, he said breathlessly, there is a problem. Poirot remained calm. A problem, you say? The officer nodded. The engineer received an urgent telegram, instructing us to stop the train immediately. Marchand stiffened. Who sent it? The officer hesitated. It was unsigned. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, very clever. He turned to Marchand. And someone does not want us to reach our destination. Hastings frowned. You think it's a trap? Poirot sighed. I think, mon ami, that we are about to receive a visitor. The man in the grey coat, V. If on cue, a lone figure emerged from the mist outside the train. He was tall and slender, wearing a grey overcoat and a wide-brimmed hat that obscured his face. His gait was unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. Marchand's hand tensed over his revolver. Who the devil is that? Poirot watched keenly as the man approached the carriage. Then, to everyone's surprise, he lifted his hands in surrender. I come in peace, monsieur. the man said in a smooth, cultured voice. "I wish only to speak." Poirot studied him for a moment before nodding. "Very well, monsieur. You may enter." Marchand shot Poirot a look of warning, but the detective merely smiled. The man stepped into the carriage and removed his hat. He was middle-aged with sharp, aristocratic features and piercing green eyes. He regarded them with quiet amusement. "I'm Lucien Morel," he said, "and I believe you are in possession of something that belongs to me." Poirot's smile did not waver. "Ah, you must mean the hollow dagger." Morel inclined his head. "Indeed." Marguerite's face paled. You're one of them, aren't you?" Hastings frowned. "One of who?" Morel chuckled. "My dear Captain Hastings, surely you must have realized by now. The hollow dagger is no ordinary relic." Poirot's expression remained unreadable. "Then perhaps you might enlighten us." Morel smiled. "With pleasure. The hollow dagger is the symbol of an ancient order, one that has existed in secret for centuries. Its true purpose is not for murder, but for—" He paused. "Selection." Hastings stiffened. "Selection? What the devil are you talking about?" Morel's gaze turned cold. "Only those worthy may possess the dagger, and those who try to claim it without understanding its power must be removed." Marguerite let out a sharp breath. "You killed the Baroness." Morel gave a small smile. "She was unworthy." Marchand's hand clenched around his revolver. "And Paul Girard, was he unworthy too?" Morel's expression did not change. "Paul Girard was a fool. He thought he could betray us and walk away. We merely gave him an opportunity to confess." Hastings's eyes widened. "You forced his confession." Morel inclined his head. "We gave him a choice. He took the honorable way out." Poirot's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath his words. "And now you wish to take the dagger." Morel's smile remained. "Yes, you are clever, Monsieur Poirot, but this is beyond your concern." Poirot exhaled softly. "Ah, but, you see, monsieur, you make one mistake." Morel raised an eyebrow. "And what is that?" Poirot's eyes flashed. "You assume I would ever let you leave with the dagger." The final play. Without another word, Poirot flipped open his travel bag and pulled out the silk-wrapped bundle. But when he unwrapped it, it was empty. Morel's smile vanished. "What?" Poirot's voice was soft. "Ah, monsieur, did you truly believe I would bring the real dagger?" Morel's hands clenched into fists. "Where is it?" Poirot's smile was triumphant. "Far away, where no one, not you nor your order, will ever find it." Morel's face twisted in fury. "You fool!" Poirot simply tipped his hat. "Au revoir, Monsieur Morel." At that moment, Marchand raised his revolver. Morel turned and fled, vanishing into the mist. As the train began to move again, Hastings exhaled. "Poirot, you planned this all along, didn't you?" Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "Naturally, mon ami. The hollow dagger was gone forever, and the case was finally closed." Ebb of shadows. The train resumed its journey, the rhythmic chugging of the engine filling the tense silence in the carriage. Morel had vanished into the mist, but the weight of his words still hung in the air. Hastings was the first to break the silence. "Well, that was dashed close, Poirot. But tell me, where is the real hollow dagger?" Poirot gave a small smile, adjusting his perfectly aligned cuffs. "Ah, Hastings, you think I would be so foolish as to reveal that so soon? No, no. The dagger is precisely where it must be, beyond the reach of those who seek it." Marchand frowned. "You're saying it's not on this train?" "Precisely." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Before we boarded, I entrusted it to a very capable person, someone who is beyond suspicion." Marguerite Rousseau gasped softly. "You mean?" Poirot nodded. "Indeed, mademoiselle, the real hollow dagger is currently en route to an undisclosed location, far from the hands of Monsieur Morel and his so-called order." Hastings exhaled. "You never cease to amaze me, Poirot. But if the dagger is safe, why do I get the feeling that we are not?" Poirot's smile faded. "Because, mon ami, Morel is not the type of man who accepts defeat so easily. He will return, and when he does, he will not come alone." A mysterious letter. No sooner had Poirot spoken than there was a sharp knock at the carriage door. Marchand tensed, his hands drifting toward his revolver. "Morel." Poirot shook his head. "No, mon cher. If it were Morel, he would not knock." He stood and opened the door. A nervous-looking train steward stood outside, holding a small envelope. "Forgive the intrusion, monsieur," the steward stammered, his eyes darting between them. "This letter was left at the station before we departed. It is addressed to Monsieur Hercule Poirot." Poirot took the envelope carefully. "Merci, mon ami." The steward hesitated. "The man who left it, he told me to tell you, the game is not over." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Ah, a most ominous message indeed." The steward gave a quick bow and hurried away. Hastings leaned forward. "Well, go on, Poirot. Open it." Poirot delicately unfolded the letter. His sharp eyes scanned the words, his expression darkening as he read. "Monsieur Poirot, you are most amusing. You believe you have outmaneuvered us, but you have only delayed the inevitable. The dagger is ours, and we shall claim it, one way or another. The next move is yours, but know this. If you interfere further, you will regret it. Sleep lightly, detective." A friend Hastings paled. "Good heavens," Marchand muttered a curse. "They're watching us." Poirot exhaled softly. But they have made a mistake." Marguerite looked at him in confusion. "What mistake?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "They believe they are hunting me. But in truth, it is I who am hunting them." The sleeper agentess night fell. The train wound its way through the rolling countryside. Poirot sat deep in thought, tapping a delicate rhythm on his armrest. Finally, he spoke. "Tell me, Marchand, have you ever heard of the Circle of 13? Marchand frowned. "The secret society?" "Precisely." Poirot's voice was grave. "Morel and his order are merely a front. The true power lies with the Circle of 13, a clandestine network that has existed for over a century, manipulating events from the shadows." Hastings swallowed hard. "And you think they want the dagger?" "I do not think, mon ami. I know." Poirot's voice was firm. "And if they are involved, then there is only one conclusion." Marchand tensed. Which is? Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. There is a traitor on this train. A heavy silence filled the carriage. Marguerite's hands clenched into fists. You mean one of us? Poirot's expression was unreadable. Not necessarily, but someone on this train is working for them, and I intend to find out who. The trap is set. The train reached a small way station near the border. Poirot stood, straightening his tie. It is time, he said. Marchand frowned. Time for what? Poirot's eyes gleamed. To set the trap. Hastings sat forward. Trap? What sort of trap? Poirot simply smiled. A Poirot-style one, mon ami. They followed Poirot to the dining car, which was nearly empty at this hour. Poirot took a seat near the back, facing the entrance. Marchand and Hastings sat beside him. The minutes ticked by. Then a shadow moved. A figure entered the dining car, pausing briefly before heading to a nearby table. The figure was clad in a dark coat, a scarf concealing most of their face. Poirot's voice was soft. Our traitor has arrived. Marchand stiffened. Who is it? Poirot's gaze never wavered. We shall see. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small slip of paper. With deliberate care, he placed it on the table and slid it forward. It read, I know who you are. Meet me in the baggage car. Come alone. Poirot glanced up at Hastings. Now, mon ami, we wait. The face behind the mask. 15 minutes later, Poirot and Hastings made their way to the baggage car. The train's soft rocking created long shifting shadows in the dimly lit compartment. Poirot gestured for silence. Then, a movement. A figure emerged from behind the stacked luggage. It was Pierre Leclerc, the assistant conductor. Hastings gaped. Good Lord, but he's just a railway worker. Poirot shook his head. No, mon ami, he is much more than that. Leclerc's face was pale. Monsieur Poirot, Poirot lifted a hand. Do not bother with denials, monsieur. I know everything. Leclerc's shoulders sagged. Then, it is over. Poirot nodded. But the question remains, who are you protecting? Leclerc hesitated. Then, a gunshot rang out. Hastings dove for cover. Marchand pulled his revolver, scanning the shadows. Poirot did not move. His voice was eerily calm. They are here. The baggage car lurched, the train entering a dark tunnel. The lights flickered. And then, all at once, the world was plunged into darkness. Chapter 12. Poirot's Final Gambit. The train plunged into darkness, its wheels screeching against the tracks as it hurtled through the tunnel. For a moment the world was a void, silent, tense, and filled with unseen dangers. Then, another gunshot rang out. Hastings flung himself to the ground. Blast it all, he gasped. Poirot, are you all right? A flicker of movement, a sheer shadow shifting in the dim glow of the emergency lights flickering back to life. Stay down, mon ami. Poirot's voice was calm but firm. A figure darted between crates, the gleam of metal in their hand. Marchand, his revolver raised, spun toward the movement. Leclerc dropped the gun, but it wasn't Leclerc. It was someone else, the true traitor revealed, the hand in the shadows. As the train rattled forward, the baggage car became a battlefield of nerves. Hastings scrambled behind a stack of luggage as another shot whistled past his ear. Then, a clink, a revolver hitting the floor, a gasp of pain. Marchand surged forward, seizing the figure by the arm and pinning them against the wooden crates. Light flooded the traitor's face. Marguerite Rousseau. Hastings gasped. "What, Marguerite?" The young woman's face was twisted with desperation, her chest heaving as she struggled against Marchand's grip. "You," Poirot murmured, stepping forward, his hands folded neatly behind his back. "It was always you." Marguerite's lips trembled. I don't know what you mean." "Ah, mademoiselle," Poirot sighed, shaking his head. "You were very clever. You played the frightened woman well. But there were two things you did not account for." Marguerite's gaze darted toward the door, calculating. Poirot lifted a finger. "One, you were too clever. Every lie you told was almost perfect, but I have studied human nature, and I know when someone is trying too hard to be something they are not." Marguerite's breathing quickened. "And two," Poirot smiled, tilting his head, "you left a footprint in the game, long before you ever realized." Hastings stared at Poirot. "What are you talking about?" Poirot reached into his pocket and pulled out a small slip of paper. "The note that was slipped under my door," he explained. "It was meant to be an anonymous warning, but the perfume lingered. A rare fragrance, one only worn by a select few." He looked at Marguerite. "Including you, mademoiselle." Marguerite paled. I don't," Poirot continued, relentless. "And then there was the matter of Morel's disappearance. You gasped at all the right moments, but you never asked the right questions." Marchand's grip tightened on her wrist. "She's the one who led us on the wrong trail." Poirot nodded. She played her part perfectly, the innocent woman caught in the midst of a dangerous plot, but it was all a performance, n'est-ce pas?" Marguerite's breath shuddered. Then, in a sudden movement, she twisted violently, breaking free from Marchand's grasp. A sharp click, a hidden knife in her hand. Marchand lunged forward, but Poirot's voice rang out. "Enough." His tone was absolute, unshakable. Marguerite froze. Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "Mademoiselle, you are outnumbered, outmatched. There is no escape." Marguerite trembled, her fingers gripping the knife's hilt. Poirot took a step forward. "Why did you do it?" he asked softly. Marguerite's eyes glistened. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Because they gave me no choice. The true conspiracy." Unveiled, Marguerite's shoulders sagged. "You think I am the mastermind?" She laughed bitterly. "No, I am merely a pawn." Poirot tilted his head. "And who, pray, is the king of this game?" Marguerite hesitated. I cannot say," Marchand pressed. "Morel, the order." A shake of her head. "They are nothing but shadows." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Then who?" Marguerite inhaled shakily. "A name, whispered in secret places, a name that makes men tremble." She lifted her gaze. "The Marquess." Hastings stiffened. "The Marquess." Marchand's expression darkened. "Impossible. The Marquess is a myth, a ghost." Marguerite's smile was hollow. "No, Monsieur Marchand. He is very, very real." Poirot absorbed this information, his mind whirring with connections. Then he nodded. "Merci, mademoiselle," he said simply. Marguerite's lips parted. You You believe me." Poirot's gaze was unreadable. "I believe in the truth, wherever it may lead." The fate of Marguerite Rousseau moments later, the train emerged from the tunnel, bathed once again in moonlight. The authorities awaited them at the next station. Marguerite did not resist when they placed her in handcuffs. She merely smiled, a sad, knowing smile. As she was led away, Hastings exhaled. "Well, I'll be dashed." This was quite the case. Poirot smoothed his moustache. "Indeed, mon ami, a game of shadows played by unseen hands." Nauchon rubbed his chin. "And what of this Marquess? Do you truly think he exists?" Poirot's expression was thoughtful. "Perhaps, or perhaps he is merely another illusion." Hastings frowned. "Then what was all this for? The hollow dagger, what does it mean?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, mon cher Hastings, that is the question, is it not?" He turned, stepping off the train onto the misty platform. Poirot, the master of the little grey cells, had won another battle. But the war of shadows had only just begun. Chapter 13. Shadows That Linger. The streets of Paris were cloaked in the hush of early morning. A gentle rain drizzled over the rooftops, painting the cobblestones in shimmering silver. Inside a quiet café near the Seine, Hercule Poirot sat with his hands neatly folded over the pristine white tablecloth, a cup of steaming chocolate chaud before him. Across from him, Captain Hastings absently stirred his tea, a frown creasing his brow. "I can't shake the feeling, Poirot. The Marquess, whoever he is, Marguerite was terrified of him." Poirot inclined his head slightly, his fingers methodically adjusting the placement of his spoon. "Oui, mon ami. And yet, what do we truly know of this Marquess? A name, a whisper, nothing concrete." Hastings exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "And the hollow dagger? We never truly uncovered its purpose." Poirot's moustache twitched. "On the contrary, Hastings, we uncovered everything, but not in the way you expect." Hastings looked baffled. "What do you mean?" Poirot took a delicate sip of his drink before answering. "You focus too much on the dagger itself, mon ami, but the true weapon was never steel." He tapped his temple lightly. "It was always the mind." A letter from the dead at that moment. A uniformed messenger approached the table, bowing slightly before extending an envelope. "From Monsieur Poirot. It arrived at the Hotel Meurice early this morning." Poirot accepted the letter with a small nod. The envelope bore no return address, only a wax seal pressed into deep crimson. The symbol, a hollow dagger. Hastings stiffened. What at the devil? With great care, Poirot unfolded the letter, his eyes scanning the precise, almost elegant, handwriting. "Monsieur Poirot, you are very perceptive. You saw through Marguerite Rousseau's performance, and you unraveled the lies she wove. Yet you were always meant to solve this mystery, were you not? After all, what is a game without its greatest player? The dagger is meaningless. The crime was never about an artifact. No, it was about seeing whether the great Hercule Poirot could keep up with the pieces I placed upon the board. You have done well, but this is only the beginning. We shall meet again, detective." The Marquis Hastings paled. Good Lord. Poirot remained silent for a long moment. Then, carefully, he refolded the letter, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Well, Hastings," he said at last, "it seems the true game has only just begun." The hollow truth. Hastings pushed his teacup aside, his voice low. "Poirot, this isn't just some criminal mastermind. This is something bigger." Poirot's gaze drifted out the window, where the rain painted shifting patterns upon the glass. A web spun long before we ever stepped into it." Hastings frowned. "You mean?" Poirot nodded. "The hollow dagger was never about the object itself. It was a symbol of power, of control. And Marguerite Rousseau, she was merely a pawn, a well-placed one, but a pawn nonetheless." Hastings exhaled. "But why go through all this trouble? The murder, the deception, the intricate setup. What was the point?" Poirot's fingers traced the rim of his cup. "To observe me, mon ami. To see how Hercule Poirot would react." Hastings shuddered. "That's downright unsettling." Poirot met his gaze. "Precisely. That is what makes this Marquess dangerous. Not merely their intelligence, but their curiosity." A shadow among them, across the cafe, a man sat, with his back to them, his overcoat damp from the rain. He was reading a newspaper, his face obscured. Poirot's gaze flickered toward him. The man did not turn, but he was listening. Poirot set down his cup. "Come, Hastings. We have lingered long enough." Hastings blinked. "Where are we going?" Poirot stood, brushing an invisible speck from his sleeve. "To begin our next case." Hastings hesitated. "Which is?" Poirot smiled. "To uncover who truly holds the dagger." Behind them, the man in the overcoat folded his newspaper and rose as well. The rain continued to fall. Into the distance, the game of shadows played on. Chapter 14. The Mocker Strikes. The rain had ceased by the time Poirot and Hastings returned to their hotel, but a thick fog still curled through the streets of Paris, muffling the city's usual vibrance. The events of the past days weighed heavily on them, but there was no time for reflection, because just as Poirot removed his hat and settled into the suite's armchair, a sharp knock at the door broke the silence. Hastings, who had just poured himself a drink, turned toward Poirot, expecting someone. Poirot steepled his fingers. "No." His voice was calm, but his eyes, sharp as ever, betrayed his anticipation. Hastings opened the door to reveal Inspector Jules Fournier of the Sûreté, looking visibly disturbed. In his hand, he clutched a telegram. "Monsieur Poirot," he said breathlessly, stepping inside, "we have a situation." Poirot gestured for him to sit. "Pray, continue, Monsieur Fournier." Fournier handed over the telegram. Poirot unfolded it with meticulous care. "A body has been discovered in the Grand Hotel, room 407. The victim was stabbed. No murder weapon found. Only clue, a card left on the bedside table. It bore a symbol of a hollow dagger." Hastings exhaled sharply. Good Lord! Poirot's expression was unreadable. He turned to Fournier. "You believe this to be connected to Marguerite Rousseau's case?" Fournier's face darkened. "There's more, Poirot. The victim is someone you know." Hastings stiffened. "Who?" Fournier's next words made the room feel suddenly colder. "Émile Laurent." Hastings blanched. Laurent, the shrewd Parisian lawyer who had assisted in investigating Rousseau's financial dealings, was now dead. Poirot rose slowly. "Then, mes amis, we must go at once." Room 407, a message in blood. The Grand Hotel was a magnificent establishment, its chandeliers still gleaming, despite the late hour. A hush had fallen over the corridors leading to room 407, where two uniformed officers guarded the door. Inside, the scene was grim. Émile Laurent's body lay sprawled on the plush carpet, his lifeless eyes staring at the ornate ceiling. A single stab wound pierced his heart, but as Fournier had warned, the murder weapon was absent. On the bedside table, neatly placed as if mocking the investigators, was a playing card, the ace of spades etched into its surface in what appeared to be blood was the symbol of a hollow dagger. Hastings swallowed hard. "Poirot, this is a warning, isn't it?" Poirot's gaze was distant. "No, Hastings, it is an invitation." He turned toward the body, kneeling beside Laurent. His keen eyes noted the lack of blood spatter, the strange position of the corpse, and, most curiously, the faintest trace of ink on Laurent's fingers. Poirot murmured, almost to himself, he was writing something before he died. Fournier nodded. "We found a torn scrap of paper in the fireplace, but the words are barely legible." He handed Poirot a half-burned note, the only surviving words. "Beware the M." Hastings tensed. "The Marquess." Poirot carefully placed the paper in his pocket. "It is highly likely. Laurent knew something, mon ami. And for that, he was silenced." He straightened, his mustache twitching in determination. "This is no longer merely a crime of the past, Hastings. The Marquess plays his game in the present, the woman in the black veil." The next morning, Poirot and Hastings sat in Fournier's office, sifting through files connected to Laurent's latest legal dealings. As they worked, a police clerk entered hesitantly. "Inspector, there is a woman here to see Monsieur Poirot. She refuses to give her name." Poirot arched an eyebrow. "Intriguing. Show her in." Moments later, a woman in a black veil entered, moving gracefully, yet with visible hesitation. The perfume she wore, subtle yet unmistakable, was the same as Marguerite Rousseau's. Poirot gestured to a chair. "Mademoiselle, you have something to tell me?" The woman's gloved hands clenched. A voice, though soft, carried urgency. "Monsieur Poirot, I bring a message from someone who cannot be here himself." Hastings leaned forward. "And who might that be?" The woman hesitated. Then she whispered, "The Marquess." A tense silence settled in the room. Poirot's voice was even. "Ah, and what does this elusive figure wish to say?" The woman's gloved fingers trembled as she reached into her purse and placed an envelope on the desk. It bore no name, only the symbol of the hollow dagger. Poirot picked it up and carefully unfolded the note. "Monsieur Poirot, you are persistent, as expected, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. Émile Laurent did not heed my warning. Will you stand at the edge of a game greater than you know. Turn back now, or be prepared to lose more than your deductions. The hollow dagger is but the beginning." The Marquis Poirot's fingers tightened around the paper. His expression remained impassive, but Hastings, who knew him well, could see the storm brewing beneath his calm demeanor. Hastings muttered, "They're threatening you, Poirot." Poirot met the woman's gaze. "And what do you say, mademoiselle? Do you share your master's warning?" The woman exhaled shakily. "I do not serve him. I am trapped by him." Poirot studied her carefully. "You fear him." A single tear slipped beneath her veil. "You cannot imagine." Poirot reached into his pocket and produced a small handkerchief, pressing it gently into her palm. "Then tell me, mademoiselle, help me end his game." She looked at him then, truly looked at him. And for the first time, Poirot saw something he had not expected: hope. The game begins. Again that evening, as Poirot and Hastings left the Sûreté, the city of Paris stretched before them, its streets illuminated by the flickering glow of gas lamps. Hastings sighed. "This Marquess, whoever he is, clearly has eyes everywhere. Are you certain we should keep digging?" Poirot paused, adjusting his gloves. His eyes, usually filled with mirth, were cold with resolve. "Mon ami," he said quietly, "when a murderer issues a challenge, Hercule Poirot does not retreat." He glanced once more at the mysterious symbol of the hollow dagger, now burned forever in his mind. "This is no longer a mere puzzle, Hastings. It is war. And somewhere, hidden within the labyrinth of Paris, the Marquis watched. The next move belonged to him." Chapter 15. The House of Shadows. The streets of Paris were alive with the distant hum of conversation, the clatter of horse-drawn carriages, and the flickering glow of street lamps casting elongated shadows upon the cobblestones. Yet, for all the city's charm, there was an air of foreboding hanging over Poirot and Hastings as they walked toward their hotel. The letter from the Marquis was still fresh in their minds, a veiled threat, an invitation to step away from the dangerous game that was unfolding. But Poirot was not one to retreat. Hastings, his brow furrowed in concern, sighed deeply. "Poirot, do you think we're being followed?" Poirot didn't answer at first, his gaze sweeping over the darkened storefronts, the occasional passerby wrapped in their own affairs. Then he murmured, "May we, Hastings? The hunter watches his prey." Hastings stiffened, instinctively, glancing over his shoulder. "You mean we are the prey?" Poirot smiled, calm, unbothered. "For now." They turned onto Rue de l'Impasse, a narrow alley that provided a shortcut to their hotel. The air here was damp, and the light barely reached beyond the overhanging buildings. A shadow moved. Hastings froze. "Poirot!" Before he could react, a figure emerged from the darkness. A tall man, dressed in an impeccably tailored Blackefeet coat and gloves, his face concealed beneath the brim of a hat. Poirot stepped forward, his sharp eyes assessing the newcomer. "Bonsoir, monsieur. You have been waiting for us, n'est-ce pas?" The man's voice was low, calculated. "You are as perceptive as they say, Monsieur Poirot." Hastings clenched his fists. "Who are you?" The stranger ignored him and produced an envelope, sealed in crimson wax. He held it out to Poirot. "From my employer." Poirot took the envelope, but did not open it immediately. Instead, he studied the man's gloved hands. "Your employer, the Marquess." The man inclined his head. "A name is but a mask, Monsieur Poirot, and the one my employer wears is not so easily removed." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but masks, they have a way of slipping, mon ami." Man hesitated for only a moment, before stepping back into the shadows. Within seconds, he was gone. Hastings exhaled loudly. "Poirot, this is madness. They're watching us at every turn." Poirot opened the envelope, revealing a single slip of paper, Maison de l'Ombre. "Midnight. Come alone." Hastings grabbed his arm. "Absolutely not, it's a trap." Poirot's expression did not waver. "Évidemment. But Hastings, the question is, for whom? Maison de l'Ombre, the House of Shadows." The Maison de l'Ombre was a forgotten relic of Paris, a grand townhouse that had fallen into disrepair. Its windows were shuttered, its gates rusted, its presence almost erased from the city's memory. Few spoke of it, fewer still dared to enter. And yet, Poirot stood before its towering facade at 5 minutes to midnight, a gloved hand resting on the iron gate. Hastings had argued furiously against this venture, but Poirot had been adamant. He must go alone. The dint, a soft push, the gate creaked open. Poirot stepped inside. The interior of the house was as lifeless as its exterior. The grand staircase, once a symbol of elegance, was draped in cobwebs, the air thick with dust. A single candle flickered on a table in the center of the foyer. And then, a voice, "You came." Poirot turned toward the shadows. From the darkness emerged a woman in the black veil. The woman's warning, her breath was unsteady. She removed her veil, revealing dark, intelligent eyes filled with fear. "You are in danger, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot inclined his head. "That much I have already deduced." She stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "I was sent to deliver the marquis's message to you, but I am no longer under his command. You must listen carefully." Poirot remained perfectly still, watching her. "The Marquis is more powerful than you realize. He controls more than just men. He controls secrets, and secrets, Monsieur Poirot, are currency." Poirot folded his arms. "And why do you tell me this, mademoiselle?" A flicker of pain crossed her face. "Because I know what he has planned for you, and for me. I can help you, but you must act quickly." Poirot studied her carefully. "Mademoiselle, what is your name?" She hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Geneviève." Poirot nodded. "Très bien, Geneviève. Tell me, what does the Marquess intend?" She exhaled shakily. "He knows you are closing in, and he does not intend to let you leave Paris alive. A deadly interruption, a gunshot." The sound shattered the silence of the house. Geneviève gasped, clutching her arm. Blood seeped between her fingers. Poirot reacted instantly, grabbing her before she could collapse. Another shot rang out, striking the wooden staircase behind them. The assassin was here. Poirot pulled Geneviève behind the candlelit table, his mind racing. They were exposed. He turned toward the shadows, his voice ringing through the house. "You lack subtlety, my friend. A true assassin does not announce himself." There was no response, only silence, and then footsteps. Poirot felt Geneviève tremble against him. She whispered, "We must go." Poirot nodded, his mind working fast. "Stay close." With precision, he moved toward the side entrance, keeping low. Another bullet whizzed past, missing him by mere inches. Poirot didn't answer. His eyes moved swiftly, cataloging other anomalies. A stagehand lingering too long near the orchestra pit. A woman whispering to a man in the shadows. A gloved hand adjusting a pocket watch. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered before him. Then the lights dimmed. The performance was beginning. A performance in shadows. The opera opened with a haunting overture. The stage was bathed in blue light, revealing a lone actress, the queen, doomed to die. Her voice soared, filling the grand hall with tragedy and beauty. The audience was entranced, but Poirot was watching something else entirely. From the corner of his vision, he saw movement in the gallery. The man in black had shifted positions. Another man, a gentleman in military attire, had subtly touched his cufflink, signaling someone. Poirot leaned forward, his heart quickened. Hastings muttered, "Poirot, you're tenser than usual." Poirot whispered, "The game is in motion." Then, a flicker of light. Poirot's gaze snapped upward. In the rafters above the stage, something glinted. A sniper's rifle. The shot that never came. Poirot lunged forward, grabbing Hastings's sleeve. Quickly, they pushed past the other guests in their box, racing towards the upper level. From the shadows, the sniper adjusted his aim. The rifle was fixed on the stage, on a specific target. Poirot's mind raced. Who was the target? The queen? No, the true victim was in the audience. Then, a shadow moved. Another figure appeared in the rafters, unseen by most. Poirot caught a glimpse of a hooded figure, swift and precise. A blade flashed. The sniper jerked forward, clutching his throat. Poirot's breath caught. The assassin had been assassinated. The sniper tumbled from the rafters, his body hitting the stage below with a sickening thud. A scream rang through the opera house. The performance halted instantly. Panic erupted. Guests leaped from their seats. The orchestra stopped playing. The air filled with shouts and confusion. Poirot stood frozen, his mind working faster than ever. Hastings grabbed his arm. "Poirot, what had just happened?" Poirot's voice was grave. "The Marquis cleans his own messes. The assassin had failed, so he had been eliminated. And now, the true mastermind was vanishing into the night. The escape at the opera house descended into chaos. Poirot and Hastings rushed toward the exits, but before they could reach the doors, a voice cut through the air. "Monsieur Poirot." Poirot stopped. From the shadows of the grand staircase emerged a tall figure, his face obscured by the dim lighting. Poirot's breath caught. The Marquis. Dressed in an impeccable black suit, the man inclined his head. "You are a persistent man, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot's voice was calm. "And you, monsieur, are a careful one, killing your own man before he could speak." The Marquis chuckled. "A necessary inconvenience." Poirot stepped forward. "Who was the true target?" Marquis tilted his head. "The answer is already before you." Poirot narrowed his eyes. "The queen in the opera? No, someone important in the audience." And then it hit him. It was never about the opera. It was about the message. Hastings whispered, "Poirot, we should leave." The Marquis smiled, a knowing, chilling smile. "Au revoir, Monsieur Poirot." And then he was gone. The next day, the newspapers would report a dead assassin, an interrupted performance, and a powerful official who left Paris in secrecy. But Poirot knew this game was far from over. The final act had yet to begin. Chapter 17. The Silent Masquerade. The air in Paris was crisp, a gentle evening breeze carrying the scent of fresh rain over the cobblestone streets. The city, still buzzing from the previous night's deadly opera spectacle, was rife with whispers of conspiracy. Poirot had spent the morning reading the headlines: "Assassin strikes at Grand Opera House," "Mysterious sniper falls to his death," "Adieu, failed plot, or a larger game." But Poirot knew the truth was far more complex than the press could ever uncover. The sniper had not failed. He had been silenced. And at the center of it all was the Marquess. A mysterious invitation. It was nearing midnight when Hastings found Poirot seated at his desk, staring intently at a small cream-colored envelope. A golden seal was pressed onto the back, bearing an emblem of 2 crossed keys. Hastings raised an eyebrow. "Another cryptic message, I presume." Poirot turned the envelope over, admiring its delicate craftsmanship. "Indeed, Hastings, but this is no ordinary letter. It is an invitation." Hastings frowned. An invitation to what? Poirot carefully unfolded the letter and read aloud, "Monsieur Poirot, you are cordially invited to an evening of intrigue, elegance, and revelation. The truth awaits under the mask. Midnight at the Château de Lumière." Hastings crossed his arms. A masquerade ball, and at Château de Lumière. That's one of the most exclusive estates in France. Poirot smiled. "Ah, Hastings, do you not see? This is no mere social gathering. This is a performance, one orchestrated by the Marquess himself." Hastings sighed. "Then it's a trap." Poirot nodded. "Oui, but a trap can be most enlightening if one enters with open eyes." The Château de Lumière stood on the outskirts of Paris, its white stone walls illuminated by torches and golden chandeliers. The mansion was a relic of aristocratic France, ornate, luxurious, and steeped in history. As Poirot and Hastings arrived, they found themselves in the midst of a grand masquerade. Guests adorned in elaborate Venetian masks and lavish gowns twirled across the ballroom floor, their faces obscured, but their intentions carefully concealed. The air was thick with the scent of fine champagne, cigar smoke, and deception. Poirot adjusted his own mask, a simple, elegant black one, while Hastings fidgeted with his silver-laced disguise. "I feel ridiculous," Hastings muttered. Poirot chuckled. "Courage, mon ami. Tonight we play our roles." A masked butler approached and bowed. "Monsieur Poirot, this way." Hastings frowned. "How did he know it was you?" Poirot smirked. "Ah, Hastings, it is not so difficult. Even behind a haute mask, the great Poirot is unmistakable." They were led through a corridor adorned with golden candelabras and oil paintings of long-forgotten nobles. The sound of the ballroom faded as they were guided to a private salon, its doors marked with the emblem of the crossed keys. Inside, a roaring fireplace cast dancing shadows on the walls. A single figure stood waiting, his back turned, gazing into the flames. Poirot recognized the silhouette instantly, the Marquess. A game of words. The Marquis turned, his mask a deep crimson with silver embroidery, an intricate design resembling a watchful eye. His voice, smooth as silk, filled the room. "Monsieur Poirot, at last we meet properly." Poirot stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. "Bonsoir, Monsieur le Marquis. You have gone to great lengths for this meeting." The Marquis chuckled. "I believe in spectacle, and you, Monsieur Poirot, appreciate a good performance." Hastings, ever the skeptic, crossed his arms. "Enough with the theatrics. Why bring us here?" The Marquis tilted his head. "Because the game is nearly at its end." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You mean your game of murder and deception?" The Marquis smiled beneath his mask. "Call it what you will, but you and I are not so different, Monsieur Poirot. We both seek the truth. We both see beyond the illusion." Poirot's voice was cold. "The difference, monsieur, is that I seek justice. You seek control." A pause. Then the Marquis clapped his hands lightly. "A sharp observation, as expected." Poirot stepped closer. "You orchestrated the events at the opera. You silenced your own man to protect your greater plan." The Marquis nodded. "A sacrifice. Some pieces must be removed to clear the board." Poirot's voice dropped. "And Geneviève, where is she?" The Marquis's mask tilted slightly. "Gone." Hastings tensed. "Gone? What does that mean?" The Marquis sighed. "She knew too much. And when people know too much, they tend to disappear." Poirot's fists clenched. "You killed her." The Marquis took a slow step forward. "I did not say that." Silence filled the room. Poirot's mind worked furiously, searching for the hidden meaning behind the Marquis's words. Then the Marquis gestured toward the door. "But let us not dwell on the past. There is still a performance to finish. Shall we return to the ball?" Poirot straightened. "One final question, monsieur." The Marquis nodded. "Of course." Poirot's voice was firm. "Who was the true target of the assassin?" A pause. The fire crackled. Then the Marquis laughed softly. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot, that answer is already before you." Poirot felt a cold realization creep over him. The target was not the opera singer, not a politician, not an aristocrat. The target was Poirot himself. A deadly waltz ball was alive with music and motion. As Poirot and Hastings returned to the main hall, couples swayed in an elegant waltz, their masked faces betraying nothing. But Poirot felt the eyes upon him. Somewhere in this room, another assassin waited. Hastings whispered, "Poirot, I don't like this." Poirot's gaze darted across the room. "Neither do I, mon ami." Then the music stopped. A hush fell over the guests. The grand clock struck midnight. And in that frozen moment, a gunshot rang out. The final clue. Poirot spun just in time to see a masked man collapse to the ground, a gun slipping from his grasp. A dark stain spread across his chest. A bullet wound. The shooter had disappeared into the crowd. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Hastings rushed forward, kneeling beside the dying man. "Who is he?" Poirot bent down, pulling away the mask. His breath caught. It was one of the Marquis's own men. The man coughed, blood staining his lips. He struggled to speak. Poirot leaned in. The dying man whispered one final word. Geneviève. Poirot's mind reeled. She was alive, and she had just changed the game. The Marquis was not the only one pulling the strings. Somewhere in the shadows, Geneviève was fighting back, and Poirot intended to find her before it was too late. Chapter 18. The Vanishing Phantom. The echoes of the gunshots still reverberated through the grand ballroom of Château de Lumière. A masked assassin lay lifeless at Poirot's feet. His final whisper, Geneviève, lodged in Poirot's mind like a buried blade. The opulent room, filled with nobles and elite figures of Parisian society, had descended into a chaotic storm of gasps, murmurs, and shifting masks. Yet, through the swirl of silk gowns and flickering candlelight, Poirot's focus remained unwavering. Geneviève was alive, and she had just tipped the scales in their deadly game. A dance of deception. Hastings was still kneeling beside the body, face pale with shock. Poirot, what just happened? Poirot's eyes swept the room, searching for a lingering shadow, an anomaly in the carefully curated masquerade. The hunter became the hunted, mon ami. Hastings wiped his brow. You mean someone killed him to silence him? Poirot shook his head. No, someone killed him to send a message. His gaze flickered towards the Marquess, still standing near the grand staircase. Even through his crimson mask, Poirot could sense the slight tension in his posture, the brief hesitation in his movements. This was not part of his plan. For the first time, the Marquess had lost control. A violinist, shaking with fear, dropped his bow, breaking the uneasy silence. The gathered guests shifted uncomfortably, their whispered conversations filling the air like a rising tide. From the far end of the ballroom, a commanding voice rang out, "Nobody moves." A team of gendarmes had arrived, led by Inspector Renaud, a broad-shouldered man with a neatly trimmed mustache and a perpetually suspicious gaze. He strode forward, glancing down at the body before locking eyes with Poirot. "Mon Dieu, I should have known you'd be involved, Poirot." Poirot sighed dramatically. "Inspector Renaud, I assure you, my presence here is merely an unfortunate coincidence." Renaud crossed his arms. "Unfortunate for whom, I wonder?" The Marquis stepped forward smoothly, his voice laced with feigned concern. "Inspector, this is a dreadful affair. A masked ball should not end in tragedy." Renaud turned to him with a skeptical frown. "And you are?" The Marquis gave a slight bow. "A humble host, nothing more." Poirot watched the exchange carefully. The Marquis was playing his role to perfection. The concerned noble, the innocent bystander. But Poirot had seen the flicker of calculation behind his mask. The game had changed, and the Marquis was already repositioning his pieces. The masked woman, as the gendarmes began questioning guests, Poirot moved swiftly, pulling Hastings aside. "We must find Geneviève." Hastings nodded. "But how? She could be anywhere." Poirot tapped his temple. "Ah, mon ami, but she left us a clue." Hastings frowned. "You mean the assassin's last words?" "Exactly." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Geneviève is not merely alive. She wanted us to know she was alive." Hastings exhaled sharply. "So where do we start?" Poirot's gaze flickered across the ballroom, scanning the sea of masked faces. Then he saw her, a woman in an emerald green gown, standing just beyond the crowd. Her mask was golden, intricately designed like the wings of a butterfly. The moment Poirot's eyes met hers, she turned and vanished into the corridor. Quickly, Hastings, Poirot spun, moving after her. Hastings cursed under his breath, but followed. They weaved through the maze-like corridors, chasing the fleeting glimpses of green fabric as it slipped through the candlelit passages. At last, they emerged onto a balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens. The woman stood at the railing, her back to them. Poirot approached carefully. Geneviève, slowly, she turned. It was her, but her eyes, once filled with quiet determination, were now haunted, as though she had seen too much, survived too much. She held his gaze for a moment before speaking. "You shouldn't have come, Poirot." Poirot took a slow step forward. "And yet, you led me here." Geneviève exhaled shakily. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Poirot's voice softened. "Then tell me, mademoiselle, what was supposed to happen?" She hesitated. Then, a shot rang out. A bullet whizzed past Poirot's ear, shattering the stone railing beside. "Geneviève, down!" Poirot shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her behind the stone pillar. Hastings drew his revolver, scanning the rooftops. Sniper. The gunfire ceased as abruptly as it had begun. Whoever had attacked them was gone. Geneviève's breath was ragged. "They know I spoke to you." Poirot's grip on her arm tightened. "Who, Geneviève? Who is behind this?" met his gaze, and then finally she whispered, "The Marquis is not the mastermind." Poirot's blood ran cold. Hastings paled. "What are you saying?" Geneviève looked over her shoulder, as if expecting shadows to close in on her. "There's someone else. Someone more powerful, more dangerous." Poirot inhaled slowly. "Who?" Geneviève shook her head. "I don't know his name, but I do know what he calls himself." Poirot's hands clenched. "And what is that?" Geneviève's voice was barely above a whisper. "The Phantom. A silent war begins." The Phantom. Poirot had never heard the name before, but something about it sent a shiver down his spine. Who was this unseen puppet master, this spectre lurking behind the Marquis? Hastings exhaled, lowering his gun. "This just keeps getting worse, doesn't it?" Poirot adjusted his cuffs, regaining his composure. "Ah, mon ami. But now we know the game is bigger than we imagined." Geneviève took a step back. "I have to go. If they know I'm alive." Poirot held up a hand. "Wait, one more question." She hesitated. Poirot's gaze was intense. "The assassin tonight. He whispered your name before he died. Why?" Genevieve's expression darkened. "Because I sent him." Poirot's breath caught. "What?" She took another step back, her green gown shimmering in the moonlight. "He wasn't the Marquis's man. He was mine, and he failed." Poirot's mind raced to fit the pieces together. Before he could respond, Geneviève turned and disappeared into the darkness. Hastings ran forward. "Oh, wait, Geneviève." But she was gone. Poirot let out a slow breath, his mind already working. The Marquis was no longer the true enemy. The Phantom was now in play, and Geneviève, once a victim, was now a player of her own. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice calm but firm. "Mon ami, it is time we found the phantom."